Hi, this is for chapter 4, agency representation. So, in this chapter, we are going to talk about how the agency relationship uh, between the salesperson or the broker and the seller or the buyer is established, and essentially, we're going to we're going to describe how agency relationships are formed, differentiate between the various types of agency relationship, and discuss the duties owned by the agent to the principal and the principal to the agent, and summarize key consideration establishing an agency authority and preparing appropriate documentation. We'll also outline the key provisions of REBA 2002 concerning representation and its relationship to agency as established by the common law. So let's take an overview of the agency or the law of agency. If someone acts on the behalf of another, the law considers that person as being an extension of the principal, and the law governing the relationship between them and their relations with the other person is called as law of agency. There are a number of ways in which the principal agent relationship might be established, but the most common one is by an express agreement. A number of duties arise under the law of agency for which a real estate agent is responsible to the principal. The agent must honor the obligations that are inherent in the agency agreement. The agent must perform these duties in good faith and full disclosure, competence, obedience, accounting, confidentiality, and loyalty. So I repeat, the agent must perform in good faith and full disclosure, competence, audience, obedience, accounting, confidentiality, and loyalty. It is possible for an agent to delegate the agency relationship to another, but this can only be done under certain circumstances. An agent who fails to carry out these duties owed to the principal is liable to the principal, the agent's professional and local board, the registration authorities, and those responsible for prosecution. The principal in return owes the agent two responsibilities: remuneration and indemnification. The typical agency relationship between the owner of the property as principal and the real estate brokerage as agent is the seller representation agreement. Regardless of the listing form used, it will establish the agency relationship. If the agent is to represent a buyer as a principal, the agent should have the specific representation agreement with the buyer that sets out the terms of their understanding. Master servant. A master servant directly In a master servant kind of relationship, the master directly controls and supervises the work of the servant, which is bound to comply with all of the master's reasonable orders. The master is responsible to third parties for servant's action in the performance of that work. Although this relationship may have originated in the ancient doctrines of servitude, the concept persists today in a relationship involving most employees in the typical business situation, including a registered it's a real estate salesperson employed by a broker. This employment relationship is often contrasted with an agency relationship created between the principal and the agent. The degree of control and direction by an employer is greater than in the relationship between the principal and agent. The contrast is even greater with the independent contract relationship, which will only be recognized when little or no direct control is exercised over the ongoing activity of the employee. Agency and agency relationship arises in a real estate transaction when a person wishing to sell his or her home seeks seeks the assistance of a real estate brokerage through discussions with the real estate broker or salesperson employed by that brokerage. So I repeat, agency uh, with regards to an agency. An agency relationship arises in a real estate transaction when a person wishing to sell his or her home seeks assistance of a real estate brokerage through a discussion with a real estate broker or a salesperson employed by that brokerage. The principal is the seller of the property and the brokerage is the agent. Alternatively, the brokerage may be engaged by a buyer to assist the purchase of a property. In this situation, the buyer is the principal and the brokerage is the agent. The agency relationship in either case exists between the brokerage and the buyer or seller, despite the fact that the broker or salesperson actually secures the agency agreement. Agency has grown into a complex topic beyond traditional seller agency because of the evolution of client customer relationship. To complicate matters, agency practices and associated disclosure procedures currently vary by province as well as within brokerage and real estate board across Canada. Further terminologies differ based on individual provincial legislation requirements. Many many situations involving agency relationship, that is, executor acting as agents for states, guardians acting as agents for minors, and union representatives acting as agents for worker members, and brokerages acting as agents for buyers and sellers. So I repeat, the agency relationship also exists between executors acting as agent for the state, guardians acting as agents for minors, union representative acting as agent for worker members, and brokerages acting as agent for buyers and sellers. Now, the creation of agency relationship between the principal and the agent can be is happens when the agent is authorized by the principal to act on the principal's behalf in business relationship with a third party. The agency relationship results from the mutual consent between principal and agent. Formalities such as a compensation or an agreement are not necessary to create an agency. Nor does the agency have to be intended; it can be created accidentally as well. So agency can be established through various methods: by express agreement, by ratification, by apostle or by conduct, by operation of law, and by implied authority. By express agreement, which is the most common way of creating the agency relationship, an express agreement sets out the definite understanding of the client and brokerage regarding the relationship. Common law does not require the agency relationship to be expressed in writing. However, it is obviously better for both principal and agent that written relation agreement exists. In real estate profession, the practice of written authority is commonplace through the use of listing and bias agency forms. By ratification, the agency is also created by ratification if the principal accepts the benefit of an agent's previous unauthorized act. For example, Sarah Smith adopts the action of agency ABC, action of ABC Realty, although the action of ABC Realty were carried out without the express authority of Smith. Ratification can happen when a salesperson attempting to obtain obtain a listing and the homeowner will not sign an agreement but advises the salesperson that if or she has interested buyers to bring the no. When the salesperson does introduce a buyer and secures the sale, the seller has accepted the benefit and liabilities of the sale and thereby becomes the principal. When an agent expects to create agency relationship retroactively, the agent must act on the behalf of the principal even before the agency has been ratified. By possible conduct occurs when the principal gives the impression of it to a third party that another person is acting on his or her behalf. For example, the Smith by deed or conduct authorizes Jones to act on his as his or agent. Smith is then prevented from denying the existence of Jones' agency to a third party who dealt with Jones on the basis of Smith's word and conduct. In real estate, if a seller indicates to prospective buyers that they should contact a specified salesperson about the purchase of the seller's home, the seller may be legally barred from denying that agency existed, even though the listing was not signed. Agency may also be created when the agent gives permission to the third party that the agent is protecting and promoting the interests of the third party. By operation of law occurs when an emergency situation exists whereby the agent has authority to bind his principal, although under normal circumstances the right would not exist. For example, an agency might be required to save goods of the client in his or her absence when unable to reach the principal for a decision given the need of the immediate action. This type of circumstances could occur to the master of a ship or carrier of a perishable produce, but is unlikely to happen in the matters involving real estate transaction. By implied authority, the authority to act on the behalf of another can be implied under certain circumstances. For example, Smith has given ABC express authority to do something, the court would imply, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, that Smith has also given ABC Realty the authority to do those things necessary to carry on the express authority. So to repeat, the agency can be created by express agreement, by ratification, by postal or conduct, by operation of law, and by implied authority. Disclosure. Agency disclosure has become complex with the advent of various agency relationships. While agents of principle, the duty of good faith and full disclosure, more precise guidelines are required in addition to the common law requirements. Consequently, code of ethics and provincial regulatory procedures and controls have been developed requiring special disclosure procedures concerning the role and nature of agency services. Most disclosure requirements above those dictated by common law concentrate on the timings and completeness of disclosure along with the informed consent of the client. Disclosure requirements are detailed in Code of Ethics established by the Canadian Real Estate Association and Code of Ethics established by the way of regulation under REBA 2002. Members of organized real estate are required to fully disclose the existence and nature of the member agency relationship in accordance with the code. So to repeat, the agency disclosure has become complex, but the agents of principle, the duty of good faith and full disclosure, more precise guidelines are required in addition to common law requirements. Consequently, code of ethics and provincial regulatory procedures and control have been developed requiring specific disclosure procedures concerning the role and nature of agency services. Most disclosure requirements above are dictated by common law, concentrate on timing and completeness of disclosure along with informed consent of the client. Disclosure requirements are detailed in the Code of Ethics established by the Canadian Real Estate Association and the Code of Ethics by the way of regulation under the REBA 2002. Code of Ethics, Canadian Real Estate Association, and the REBA 2002. Members of organized real estate are required to fully disclose the existence and nature of the member agency relationship in accordance with the code. The CREA Code of Ethics says that a realtor must fully disclose in writing to and is advised to seek written acknowledgement from his other client and those customers who are not represented by other registrant regarding the role and nature of the service the realtor will be providing. The disclosure shall be made at the earliest possible opportunity and even prior to the realtor providing professional services which go beyond giving information as a result of the incidental contact by the consumer. REBA 2002 detailed agency representation disclosure requirement have established for registrant by REBA 2002 duties. The agent is considered in law to represent the principal and to bring principal into legal relationship with other parties. The needs of individuals are so complex that to a large extent such needs are fulfilled not by their own effort but the effort of others on their behalf. If someone wants acts on the behalf of another, he or she is considered in law to be an extension of that person. The law governing relationship between these individuals and other persons referred to as the law of agency. Agents of principle, their primary allegiance, including such duties as good faith and full disclosure, competence, obedience, and accounting. Classification and terminology regarding these duties generally fall under the term fiduciary responsibilities and vary somewhat in printed material. Fiduciary responsibilities are best described using the following six categories: disclosure, competence, obedience, accounting, confidentiality, and loyalty. Disclosure is the agent must disclose to his or her principal any information relevant to the transaction in which the agent has been engaged to assist. And this includes any fact affecting the value or, or the desirability of the property and all known relevant and material information. Competent the agent must exercise the degree of competence when representing his or principal, should such as would be expected from an average person in their occupation or occupational profession. In non-agency relationship, the law sees the agent as the extension of the principal. Thus, the principal is liable for the agent's action. Therefore, the agent will be under a duty to use superior skills and knowledge while pursuing the principal affairs. An agent who claims to be a specialist must exercise competence in that specialty. Obedience. An agent is obligated to obey the principal lawful and reasonable instruction even if agent does not agree with them. Accounting. An agent is obligated to account for all monies or property entrusted to his or her care that belongs to the principal, safeguard any money or documents related to the principal transaction or affair. Confidentiality. An agent must also use information acquired as the principal agents for any purpose that is likely to cause the principal harm or to interfere with the principal business now or in future. The duty of confidentiality should not be confused with the real estate professional responsibility to disclose known material fact about the property to non-principal. The obligation to disclose Such facts, including defects, is based on the professional duty to treat all persons fairly and honestly. Loyalty. The most important duty that agent has towards the principal is the loyalty. The agent must place the interests of the principal above everyone else except the law, and carrying out his or her function as an agent. Agents of third party, the ethical duty to be honest, the legal duty not to misrepresent, and the responsibility to exercise due care when answering queries or giving information. In real estate, the agency relationship can be established between the agent and either buyer or seller. The relationship can arise out of agreement or by expressed or implied, written or oral. The agency relationship should be in writing, and the real estate broker should ensure that all activities fall within the limits of the authority. Agency will be implied when the agents treat customers as principals, even though no written agreement or contract exists. So to recap, the duties, or rather the fiduciary duties, are disclosure, competence, obedience, accounting, confidentiality, and also loyalty. And also and this is the fiduciary responsibilities. Agents owe customers ethical duty to be honest, legal duty not to misrepresent, and the responsibility to exercise due care. So so again, agents have a responsibility, fiduciary responsibility to their clients, and also have a responsibility for their customers, which are ethical duty to be honest, legal duty to be not to misrepresent, and responsibility to exercise due care. Now, going to the next aspect, which is the termination of agency relationship. Now, the act of terminating a relationship between the principal and agent will not affect any right of either parties that arose during the agency relationship. So there are several ways to terminate an agency relationship. One is by mutual consent. The second one is revocation, the expiry, completion or the performance, impossibility, death, mental incapacity or bankruptcy, and registration cancellation. So to so the first one is mutual consent. Since the agency relationship is created by an agreement between parties, it is clear that the relationship can be terminated by the parties if they agree to do so. Revocation. Generally, a principal has an absolute right to revoke any authority given to an agent at any time. However, in the majority of real estate scenarios, the principal has agreed to certain obligations until a specific date. The principal is not required to contract with anyone as a consequence of the agency agreement, and may remove the property from the market by refusing to enter into an agreement. However, the principal may be liable for damages for breach of the agency if the terms of the agency agreement are satisfied. Similarly, the agent may terminate the agency relationship, but may remain liable for damages of breach of agreement if there was a fixed expiry date. Expiry. The agency relationship will terminate. So to kind of to understand revocation, so essentially the principal is not required to contract with anyone as a consequence of the agency agreement, and may remove the property from the market by refusing to enter into any agreement. However, the principal may be liable for damages for the breach of the agency if the terms of the agency agreements are satisfied. Similarly, an agent may terminate the agency relationship, but may remain liable for breaches for damages may liable for damages for breach of agreement if there was a fixed expiry date. The agency relationship will terminate at the date agreed to by the parties. The expiry date set out in the listing of a buyer's agency agreement. This may be replaced by either a new or renewal agreement, and a true copy of the agreement must be given to a seller. The agreement may continue for purpose of commission resulting from the sale in a holdover period, as provided in the listing agreement or buyer's agency agreement. Completion of performance. When the agent completes what was agreed to and ultimately a purpose is achieved, the relationship will terminate. impossibility. The termination will occur if the agreement involves material that no longer exists, that is a building destroyed by fire. And that becomes an impossibility. Death, mental capacity, bankruptcy. The agency agreement will terminate in the event of a death, the bankruptcy, or mental capacity of either the agent or the principal. Limited circumstances may exist where the agency agreement will continue despite the principal death. For that reason, agreements may provide for an irrevocable provision and the requirement that such agreement be binding on the estate of the principal. Termination of agency will result if the agency agreement becomes void due to the cancellation of the brokerage registration. Types of agency: there's a buyer agency, there's a dual agency, there's a seller agency, single agency, and the sub agency. So let's look at the buyer agency. Under the buyer agency, a real estate brokerage represents the interests of the buyer. Buyer agency can be established by implication as well as by written agreement. By seeking exclusive representation, Buyer seeking exclusive representation usually do so through representation agreement. This relationship is a counterpart of the seller agency with the same agency principles and practices applying. The representative of the buyer must use professional negotiation skills, seek appropriate properties that meet buyer's need, describe the merit and defects of any selected property, keep information confidential concerning the buyer, and generally act in the buyer's best interests. The hallmark of this relationship are good faith, full disclosure, competence, obedience, accounting, and loyalty. The buyer and the brokerage will enter into a signed buyer representation agreement that further details their relationship. The seller usually pays all the commission to the listing brokerage, who in turn forwards the appropriate portion to the buyer's brokerage. Alternatively, the buyer brokerage can be paid directly by the buyer. Therefore, this amount does not form part of the sale proceed. In most transactions, the commission to the buyer brokerage is paid via the listing agreement from the proceeds of the sale. Payment procedures for the payment of commission will vary by provincial jurisdiction. Dual agency. Under dual agency, the same brokerage has an agency relationship with both buyer and the seller in the real estate transaction. Dual agency also occurs when different salespersons representing buyer and seller are employed by the same brokerage. Dual agency includes those who work in different branch offices. Brokerage or the representatives must advise the seller and buyer of the dual aspect of representation and must be impartial while representing both parties. Both buyer and seller must give their informed consent in this form of representation. The law does not allow a person to assume relations so essentially inconsistent and repugnant to each other without the authority and consent of both the principals. Extreme care should be exercised if the brokerage practice dual agency representation. If dispute develops and remains unresolved, the brokerage and the representative cannot continue to act for both parties. In the simplest situation, dual agency involves seller selling a listing agreement with the brokerage and the buyer authorizing a buyer representing agreement with the same brokerage, with both parties understanding the inherent duality of function being performed by the brokerage. While legally permissible, the CREA has traditionally discouraged this practice. Dual agency can be awkward and potential dangerous, both legally and ethically, for a brokerage and its representative. Proponent of dual agency advocate the full and complete disclosure, precise guidelines for conducting dual agency situation, and proper documentation will all but eliminate any risk. However, a strong cautionary note is it must be voiced. Implied dual agency or unintended dual agency. The real danger with dual agency lies not so much with express agency, which can be largely remedied through proper procedures, but rather with implied dual agent relationship. In an expressed, fully disclosed relationship, the brokerage and representative can in fact represent both buyer and seller if the terms and responsibilities are clearly understood and agreed to by both the parties in advance through informed consent. With unintended dual agency, no formal document exists. Such duality arises when the brokerage salesperson inadvertently represents two parties or unwittingly works on both sides of the transaction. So, an example would be that the seller salesperson informs the buyer and tells him that he could get the property for a low price. Now, there's also the notion of a limited dual agency. Limited dual agency has proven popular given inherent conflict that arises with the Dual agency procedures, including variations found in individual brokerage, have have generally have generated considerable discussions. So, a limited dual agency has proven particularly has proven particularly popular given inherent conflict that arise with the normal dual agency procedures, including variations found in the individual brokerages, have generated considerable discussion. Most concern centers on the issue of confidence and loyalty owed to the seller that conflicts with dual duties owed to the buyer. Generally, limited dual agency sets out procedures regarding non-disclosure of prices that either party is prepared to pay to the other, non-disclosure of motivation via buyers or sellers, non-disclosure of terms of committing offers, non-disclosure personal or financial information unless authorized, and not represent the interests of the buyer over the seller, and the vice versa. Undisclosed dual agency. This situation arises when the professional is found to be acting in agency role for conflicting interests without prior approval, understanding, and agreement of the parties. These results may have serious consequences, including forfeiture of commission, discipline by local board or regulatory body, punitive or exemplary damages, and possibly the loss of salesperson or broker registration. The broker or a manager who is responsible for the activities of the sales force may also be at risk. Seller agency. A seller agency is an agency in which the brokerage and salesperson represent the interests of the seller exclusively. Seller typically gives authority to the brokerage to sell their property by signing listing agreement that establishes the formal agency relationship between the seller and the real estate brokerage. This agreement sets out that what the seller instruct the brokerage to do and what services are provided under the seller agency. Further, it's provided that representative of the seller will use their professional negotiation skills to seek qualified buyers and generally promote the listing properties while keeping information concerning seller confidential and always acting on the seller's best interest. Hallmark of this relationship are the good faith, full disclosure, competence, obedience, and accounting. The seller has traditionally paid a commission directly to the agent. The listing agency then pays any broker or salesperson within its employ, and if applicable, any cooperating brokerage is involved in the transaction. Single agency. Single agency is a relationship between a seller or a buyer and an agent, wherein the agent is considered in law to represent only the principal. Agents of principal their primary allegiance, including good faith and full disclosure, competence, obedience, and accounting. Single agency is information from the dual agency, in that the same agent has agent's relationship with both buyer and seller in the same registered transaction. With the rise of buyer agency, the term single agency sometimes refers to brokerages that only work with either buyers or sellers. A brokerage dealing with only buyers and not offering agency service to sellers is different jurisdiction as a single buyer brokerage. Sub-agency. Sub-agency is a relationship whereby an individual is empowered by an agent to act on the behalf of the principal of that agent. The sub-agency concept extends to the authorization of cooperating brokerages to work on the behalf of seller. Traditionally, MLS services are based on automatic offering of sub-agency by the listing brokerage to all the members of the real estate board. The use of sub-agency has gradually diminished given the growing popularity of buyer agency. Agent. An agent is authorized by the principal to represent the principal in the business transaction with another party. The role: he must obey the principal in instructions, not necessarily subject to detail or direct control. The agents authorized to bring principal into contractual relationship. Delegation of duties. As a rule of law, agents are expected to carry out their duties personally since the principal expects them to accomplish allocated tasks for which they are engaged. However, exceptions to the rule apply to the real estate brokerage express authority. The most common form of delegation is granted in a multiple relationship agreement wherein the principal authorizes the listing brokerage to cooperate with other brokerages in marketing the property. If a cooperating brokerage acts as a sub-agent, the duties of the agent to the principal are delegated to the sub-agents. Seller Smith signs an MLS agreement with ABC Realty to market his property at a price of 2.9K for a period of 90 days. By signing the listing agreement, Smith has agreed by access authority that ABC Realty is authorized to cooperate with other members of the real estate brokerage board in marketing the property. If a cooperating broker is acting as a sub-agent, ABC Realty duties are delegated to the sub-agent by express authority. Implied consent. The second form of delegation is by the way of implication. If the agent is involved in a profession in which it is common public knowledge that a delegation of duties is necessary and the standard practice, then it may be argued that the principal has given implied consent to delegate the listing of the property. Traditionally, listing traditionally the listing brokerage has was the agent and cooperating brokerage was the sub-agent owning the same duty as the seller as the listing brokerage. Since the mid-1990s, the cooperating brokerage has taken the role of a buyer agent in which allegiance is owed to the buyer, while the allegiance of the listing brokerage is owed to the seller. Consequently, the example has limited applicability in the current marketplace. Statutory is a final form of delegation whereby the real estate brokerage are permitted to delegate duties to register salesperson under about 2002. Therefore, if ABC Realty has salesperson registered under the Act, then the salesperson can work on the behalf of the brokerage to secure listings and sell property to that for that brokerage. A typical real estate transaction involving a listing brokerage, that is the agent for the seller, and any cooperating brokerages are assumed to be the agent for the buyer unless otherwise agreed to. Thus, the cooperating brokerage allegiance is towards buyer, and the listing brokerage allegiance is towards the seller, with both commission being paid for the proceeds of the sale. To repeat, there are three set of there are three possibilities of delegation of duties by express authority, implied consent, and statutory real estate. Okay, sure. Give me 1 second. Um, 1 second. So the tax year is 2016, and the primary social security number is 1337175249. Yes, 1371755249. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, no worries. It's okay. You're speaking with Sanchit Raizada. I'm the principal on the account.